Hari Om, James.
Yes, Hari Om.
It's about 1 year ago that we sat here on the same place and I did an interview with you, which was quite a good success. I heard of a lot of people who were really inspired by our dialogue we've had.
Oh, great. That's great. That's
So we give it a try to do it a second time.
All right.
Yeah. So last time we spoke mainly about enlightenment and how to get there. And this time I wanted to ask you a few specific questions about the obstacles.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So my first question is about the emotions, because lots of people are getting stuck in emotions, and it doesn't help to tell them, oh, you're just the observing awareness, you don't have to worry, it's just an experience which is coming and going. It doesn't help when you're really stuck into emotions. But what do you think about it? What can we say?
What's the solution to getting out of emotions?
Yeah.
Karma yoga.
Karma yoga.
Karma yoga, you have to analyze you have to inquire into the source of the emotion. The emotions are caused by an idea, by a thought. Behind every emotion is the thought. And there's some idea that's causing the emotion. So I have to find out what that idea is. And the idea is, it's always the same. It's the same for everybody. I'm not getting what I want. When I don't get what I want, Bhagavad Gita says, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. When I've got this desire, and the desire gets obstructed, or I think that it's even maybe obstructed, then I get emotional. Isn't it?
No.
Yeah, and from that desire, then the desire collapses into depression, or first of all, it becomes anger. The anger collapses into depression, and I feel sad and unhappy. So, the emotions are basically the painful emotions are rajas and tamas, desire, anger, and fear and depression, sadness. Those are your two basic emotions, and those are related to the fact that reality's not giving me what I think I want. Now, Karma Yoga says that those emotions are illegitimate because what you want is not up to you. So, and everybody basically knows that. So you have to remind yourself of the fact that, what you want is up to Ishvara, is up to the field of life, is up to your environment. Huh?
No.
And when you understand that, obviously, if the results of your action were up to you, and you acted incorrectly, then you could get emotional. But the results of your action are not up to you, so it's completely gratuitous and useless to get emotional about what's happening around you, because you're not the one that's determining what's going on around you, and whether or not you're going to get what you want. So I have to run through this logic in my mind over and over and over again when I feel emotional, and then that will release that bad feeling. If it's my fault, okay, then I can get emotional. If I do something wrong, then I should feel bad. But if I do my best, right, and I don't get what I want, then it's not my fault. So there's no emotion is required. And so I have to remind myself of this knowledge over and over and over again in the face of these emotional reactions. Yeah, and what's underpinning the whole thing is that I want something. So I have to analyze again further on, why do I want what I want? Well, obviously, because I think that the object that I want is going to make me complete and whole and so forth. So to defuse my emotions, I've got to go back to the source and inquire or investigate my desire for object, whatever it is, situation or whatever it is, and understand that that particular object will not make me happy. If I understand that, then I can see how ridiculous the emotion is. Because the emotion is always around not getting what I want.
So it's about knowledge, to analyze the bigger picture of life and to go out of the situation and to find out what made me emotional here. And
yeah, that's right. And you also have to look at the emotion in light of the knowledge of reality.
No.
You know.
And in an acute situation?
In an acute situation, there's nothing you can do. Vedanta is not going to work for you.
Yeah.
This only works for inquirers, people who are actually working on themselves, who don't who don't enjoy suffering, and who believe there is a way out of suffering, who really want to be out of suffering.
Yeah.
You can't, a lot of people fall in love with their emotions. They think it makes them alive.
No.
Many people in samsara, when I tell them about karma yoga and about how a peaceful mind, they say, "Oh no, I just feel totally dead." I mean, it's not really true, but they're defending their emotions as if those emotions made them feel as if they were alive.
No.
And that includes all the bad emotions. I mean, there's plenty of good emotions. They're not a problem. What we're talking about here, disturbing emotions.
Yeah, but we are not against emotions. We are just saying emotions should not control us.
That's correct. That's right. And at the same time, I mean, in a practical way, without all that analysis, if you're a sophisticated person and dispassionate by nature, and an emotion arises, all you have to do to solve that emotional problem is turn your attention back to the self. And then the emotion will either sometimes just collapse into nothingness, or it will shrink down to a manageable size and will just become a small object in your awareness, and it won't disturb you at all. Because when you think about, when you look at the emotion in the context of the self is so big and so vast that it just shrinks the emotion down, and it's no longer a problem. It may be a minor irritant, and sometimes when you turn your attention back to the self, the emotion just disappears altogether. It can disappear instantly, actually, as soon as you look away from it, because what you pay attention to, that persists, that continues to grow and continues to. So I can take my attention off it. So that option is available also.
Mm-hmm.
But all three of those possibilities, analyzing the source and looking at and understanding Ishvara, and controlling my mind, putting it back on the self when I've got an emotion, which is very difficult at first. Well, after a while you get good at it. And then you can manage your emotions. We're not saying you won't have emotions. Even enlightened people have emotions.
Yeah.
But they manage their emotions. Right? Because emotions happen when circumstances trigger something that's already in you. Mm-hmm. In other words, the anger is already in you. The sadness is already in you. It's fine. You're going along, everything's fine. You're not angry, you're not sad, you don't have an emotional problem. And suddenly, Ishvara presents a circumstance that triggers that anger or that depression or sadness in you, and then out comes the emotion. Right? So, you need to be vigilant and alert all the time, and keep your knowledge of Ishvara foremost in your mind, and your emotions will be, you'll be able to manage them carefully, easily.
Okay, you mentioned the word Ishvara, and I think this is a hard to get point. There's lots of confusion about all this topic when we speak about God and the different ways of experiencing it or knowing it. There's so much confusion about it in the spiritual world.
Well, yeah, that's right. It's a bad word.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we've got to have a word to describe it. Ishvara stands for your environment.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, this is a very immediate and practical understanding of Ishvara. Ishvara just means the world around you.
But isn't
what
it
you're experiencing?
Jagat?
Yeah, that's the Jagat, or the world around you. What the people, the places, the air, the water, all of the objects that are appearing in your life at any moment. You're not creating your environment.
Yeah.
Your environment is presented to you. It's a setup. It's part of a much bigger picture. You don't have to worry about the much bigger picture. You just have to worry about what's happening to you.
No.
Now, once you apparently get control of your immediate environment, you discover your environment seems to change because your little environment is part of a much bigger environment, and it's not disconnected from all the other forces and factors and peoples and minds and beings, living and non-living, that are affecting your little bit of the environment. So, when you have too much desire or fear, you're so focused on your own feelings, your own emotions, that you don't take the environment into account. You don't take Ishvara into account.
Yeah.
Huh? And you're not objective. Ishvara is just your objective circumstances. It doesn't have any value to it. It just is what it is. Objects are value neutral.
No.
But because of my subjectivity, my emotionality, I project on the environment. I want the environment to be different from what it is. I want it to supply me with something I don't have. But the environment isn't responsive to your needs particularly. It's controlled by all the factors outside of it. So I need to understand what my relationship to environment is and develop objectivity. That's going to gradually reduce my emotional, because then I appreciate, the limits of my control. When you're insecure, you just want to control your environment. You want to control the people around you, and you want to control everything. You want to control the food you eat. You want to control the air you breathe. You want to control. Right? Now, you have a certain amount of control, but you're not completely in control of your environment.
No.
And so any emotions that are associated with that part of the environment that you have no control over, then you just simply have to accept those.
No.
And once you accept that fact that Ishvara is as much a part of your experiences as your desires and your fears are, then your emotions calm down.
So you used the word Dharma field yesterday for Ishvara.
Yeah, Ishvara, or your environment, is an environment of laws and rules.
Yeah.
It's completely impersonal. That's what I mean. It's impersonal. It's objective.
Can you say that in opposite to the word Jagat, which is the material world or the world of existence, that Ishvara is the intelligence which is
Well, it's
underlying,
both.
or?
Ishvara is both the intelligence and the material. It's the Naimittika Karnam and the Upadana Karnam. It's both the material world, the Jagat, and it's the intelligence that's shaping that, that's managing the laws, the physical laws and the moral laws and the psychological laws that are operating. Because you've got a physical aspect. You have a body. That's a physical world. It's made up of rules. The rules of optics and audition, hearing and heat and all that. All of those laws, natural laws, are operating in your body all the time. But you violate those laws and you get sick and you have pain and so forth and so on. And also your environment includes your mind, your emotions and your thoughts. That's a psychological world. And that's a world of laws and rules too. Just exactly the same as the material world is a world of laws, the psychological world is a world of laws. If you break those rules, if you go against the natural psychology that Ishvara or that existence or nature, you could call it nature. In some of the scriptures it's called prakriti or nature, that nature is given to you, then you're going to suffer. And then there's the whole moral dimension also of Ishvara. In other words, your environment involves, moral choices and actions. And so I have to be also cognizant of that. And when I start violating, universal values, which, non-injury and truthfulness and so forth and so on, then I'm going to be emotional.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be depressed. No doubt about it. Simply because I'm violating some law.
And then you're not in harmony with the Dharma
You're with your world.
The world around us.
The world around you. You have conflicts with your wife and your kids and your colleagues and your bosses and everything else. There's all conflicts going on all the time in your mind. And those conflicts are the emotions that we want to resolve by understanding the nature of reality, of Ishvara, and gaining that objectivity. So the whole karma yoga and the whole spiritual path and the path of sadhana or spiritual work is like moving from a subjective position to an objective position. It's called vairagya. It's no longer, the raga is purely subjective. Raga means passion or desire or attachment. That's purely subjective.
Yeah.
And that's what's causing the problem. So I've got to, by analysis of my situation and the field in which I'm existing, I slowly become objective, and my emotions are subside and are taken care of.
So there's this one aspect of which we could call, if we like, God. But there is this other, which we say Bhagavan. And as far as I know, Bhagavan is the personified Ishvara, or...
Well, yeah, that's Bhagavan is Ishvara, but Ishvara is an object of devotion.
Yeah.
Generally. In the what's called the bhakti tradition or the devotional tradition, Ishvara is called Bhagavan. The actual meaning of Bhagavan is the one who has all the wealth, all the bhaga. So bhaga means wealth. So it means the one who owns everything is Ishvara or Bhagavan. And obviously, since I'm completely indebted, it's like a big banker. He's got all the wealth, and everything that Ishvara or Bhagavan has been loaned to me. It's on loan from Ishvara. So I'm very grateful to Ishvara. I love Ishvara for looking after me and giving me this loan. I've got to give back all these things. I've got to give back my body and my mind and all that stuff to Ishvara at some point, to Bhagavan. And I love Bhagavan for the simple reason that he's given me everything that I value. In fact, life itself is a gift from Bhagavan. So when you look at it that way, there's no longer, there's no room for these negative, these bad emotions to accumulate.
So then the Bhagavad Gita says that it's easier to have a concrete form or entity to be devoted to, and this is, as you said, it's Bhagavan is the one who has all the wealth.
Yeah.
So we put all the positive aspects of Ishvara in it and obey.
Yeah, obey it means just to recognize, surrender to it. But what's called surrender. Surrender just means appreciate the power of Bhagavan in my life, the power of objects in my life, and knowing that those objects, whatever they are really don't belong to me at all. That I, by God's grace, by Bhagavan's grace, I'm allowed to enjoy these objects, whatever they are. Now, they're different for everybody because this is a vast creation. Everybody has different needs and so forth. So they're all going to have, be attached to different objects, and they're going to love Bhagavan for for those objects. The main object is, of course, me, my life. That's been given to me. I didn't create that.
No. And then you can choose which form of Bhagavan you like, either Krishna or Shiva.
Well, yeah, but those deities, those personified selves. Krishna is just a personification of the self. Shiva is a personification of the self. Ganesh is a personification of the self. There's some people that, and particularly in the beginning stages of your spiritual life, you're not capable of pure knowledge, of looking at things from a pure knowledge or scientific point of view. So you need to objectify Bhagavan, objectify yourself in the form of Ishvara or Bhagavan.
Because via this way you can clean up your jiva.
That's right, and your mind expands and becomes more sattvic. It becomes more peaceful naturally, and then you don't need those forms anymore. Now I know who Bhagavan is, and I know who I am, but I still love the forms. I still worship Krishna. My wife just made this amazing Krishna and Nandi. She's a sculptress. Now we have this, I don't know what we're going to do with it now when we move, because it's big. And we don't know how to do with this darn Krishna, but because we love it and we worship it every day. Now, we know it's a symbol, but, you want to have, particularly when you're on the spiritual path, you want to have your environment full of symbols that remind you of what you're doing and who you are and what your place in the thing is. So you want an environment of symbols. Everything, and all your rituals should be associated with the Bhagavan, with the worship of the self in the form of these deities.
No.
And bhakti or devotion for these symbols is great because the self knows what you want anyway. So when you're worshiping a symbol, it gives you what you want through the symbol.
No.
So Dvaita or Bhakti is just as good as Advaita or non-duality as far as the jiva is concerned. Because Bhagavan, if your heart is pure and you worship Bhagavan properly, then Bhagavan takes care of all your stuff. And that's the same as knowledge. Krishna says, speaking as Bhagavan, or as in the Gita, Krishna says, he says, with a heart that knows no otherness, keep your mind on me alone, and I will take care of your getting and your keeping. So, and you're going to love somebody who looks after you. And Bhagavan will look after you if you're devoted to Bhagavan, no doubt about it. Bhagavan's looking after you when you aren't devoted to Bhagavan, but you don't have that same appreciation of life unless you understand who Bhagavan is and you worship Bhagavan. So, as far as Vedanta is concerned, we're all for worship of Bhagavan. If you look at Karma Yoga, I mentioned Karma Yoga earlier. Karma Yoga involves 5 practices. They're called the Pancha Yajnas, or the 5 Yajnas. And the first one is worship of Bhagavan, is worship of deities. You should be worshiping some deity. I mean, you could worship, in other words, worshiping the environment.
Yeah.
Or your parents.
By gardening.
Yeah, by gardening, and that's right, and recycling and so forth and so on. In other words, worshiping your parents. That will heal all kinds of psychological problems if you can come to, and so forth and so on. In other words, worshiping the sages, scripture and the sages, and so forth. So these are all worship of forms, but the worship goes directly through to Bhagavan, to the self in you.
No.
See, because remember, Bhagavan is you. So you're actually worshiping yourself when you're worshiping the symbol.
But because the self is like nothing or everything, you can't really do anything with it.
That's right. You can't really do anything with it. So to keep your mind satisfied, you give your mind some candy to suck on, and this love of God is a great candy. It's sweet and nice and keeps you happy all the time. It's very good.
So we can say that Bhagavan is all the positive and good and wealthy stuff around us, and
well, it's also the bad stuff too. I mean, we can't, if reality is non-dual, we cannot exclude the bad stuff, because Bhagavan is everything that is, and so So I need to appreciate that the bad stuff here, the negative things and the unpleasant things, are also serving Bhagavan somehow. They're somehow reflections or manifestations of Bhagavan. Right? And take those things as they're intended. See the upside in those things. So it's not, you can't exclude anything in your worship. I want to just look at God as just sweetness and light and all that sort of thing, but then as soon as some evil comes into my life, then it creates a huge problem in my relationship with Bhagavan.
Yeah, the Kali aspect of Bhagavan.
Yeah, when the Bin Laden blew up the World Trade Center and 3,000 people died. Then they had a big ceremony in one of the biggest cathedrals in America, and all the big, great and the good, all the powerful people came there, and they had the most famous Christian preacher, give a sermon there. There was a big event, kind of a healing sermon and a ceremony, and he said, I just can't understand why Bhagavan allowed this to happen. Why God, he called it God. Why God allowed this to happen. See? It creates a problem with his faith, because his idea that God is only good. That evil is not good.
No.
And so our idea of Bhagavan is something that's beyond good and evil. The good and the evil in this world are all aspects of Bhagavan, or 2 aspects of Bhagavan. That's called duality. But Bhagavan transcends both.
Yeah.
And because life is both, dharma and adharma, it's good and evil. It's a duality here. And I've got to appreciate both, the value of both, or I'm just going to be constantly agitated.
Okay. Speaking about Advaita Vedanta is always about non-duality. That one of the main sentences is that there's only one, and the truth is that there's no second, or there's not subject object.
One without a second.
Yeah. So I think that non-duality is not that far away, that it's just a kind of how we are aware of all the impulses which come from the outside, because regularly we feel as a subject, and objects are coming through the senses, and we are fixed on similar objects, and then it comes through the senses, and we think, okay, I am observing these objects. But another way of thinking is that always I am present and aware, and my mind, or let's say my consciousness, is full of dozens and thousands of different things which come up. Like I hear, I smell, I see so many things at the same moment that I cannot fix my mind on only one thing, but there's always fullness. So I'm always receiving the complete world in every second. And it's just the idea that I'm an individual person which makes me feel like I'm observing particular objects. But you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know. It sounds like the first statement is a statement of Ishvara. Ishvara is aware of all the objects simultaneously, but the jiva is only aware of individual objects as they appear in its mind serially, one by one.
Yeah.
Because perception is one thought, another thought, a third thought, so forth. You never actually. There's no multi-dimensionality to the jivas, to the mind. It just has one thought and then the next thought and so forth and so on. It's a stream of thinking. But non-duality means, non-duality is just knowledge. Non-duality just means that the one that sees, the awareness, the full awareness that sees, and the objects that appear in it are non-different, or non-separate. Now, that's non-duality is very difficult to understand, because perception makes it look like the objects are separate. And perception is based upon the idea that I'm my body. I don't realize that my body is just an object like a tree or a flower or a plant. It's in the same dimension of reality as all other objects. So I identify with my body, and I take that stand in this body, in the physical, and then it looks as if the objects are outside of my body.
But they just appear in me.
That's right, but they just appear in me, like my body just appears in me. And whatever appears in me is me. It's not, what you experience isn't coming from someplace else. It's not flying in from a different planetary system or different dimension and then presenting itself to me at all. It's coming out of me. It's manufactured out of my awareness, because the knowledge of any object, like a tree or a body, is what? Appears as knowledge in me. And that knowledge has no meaning apart from my awareness of it. Because you can't have knowledge without awareness. So knowledge, meaning the objects, right, are totally dependent on awareness, and they're like, a wave is dependent upon the ocean. So you could, if you look at things purely from the standpoint of the waves, you don't see any ocean there. You see duality. If you do, you think the wave is separate from the ocean, but the wave is never separate from the ocean. So my thoughts and feelings and the objects that I appear are just nothing but me appearing in myself, awareness or consciousness, appearing in various forms. Whatever thought or feeling or perception is taking place right now is just awareness, right? Taking a particular form. A sound, a smell, a taste, a touch, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, non-duality is just knowledge, and duality is just ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
See, now when you know what knowledge is and ignorance is, then you're out of the woods. You're free. And the problem is, I'm confusing knowledge and ignorance, and I think that ignorance is knowledge. So I think that my own experience, the way I experience things, is the truth. But it's not. It looks like the truth, and you can understand how you make that mistake. But and so when you analyze the situation, this Vedanta just inquires or investigates or analyzes every situation carefully. That's what these teachings are. They're just analyses, investigations into the subject and the object. Then that sense of duality dissolves, and the vision of non-duality ensues.
So it's not a way of percepting things. It's just a
No,
way
it's
of...
no, the perception stays the same. It's an understanding. Now, most people think that their perception's got to change.
Yeah.
And they
or
think,
the state.
Yeah, they want a state. They want a new experience. They want to have, I don't know what they imagine it's going to be like, some sort of orgasmic non-separation of subject and object, because you do have these experiences sometimes. I was giving a teaching one time, and the guy came back after about 20 minutes. I was just sitting in my chair, and he was crying. And I said, "What's up?" He said, "It's so beautiful." He said, "I just became the sun. I just merged into the sun, and I became one with the sun, and I didn't exist at all. And it was so beautiful. I'm so happy." And tears of joy were streaming down him. And you get these kind of epiphanies and experiences where, Bhagavan gives you this thing, not because Bhagavan's going to make you become one with the sun forever, or become one with a tree, or become one with your wife forever. It's not like that. It just creates this experience to show you, to teach you that everything's actually one. And then the old perception reemerges. Because you can't function here in a state like that. Mm-hmm. You're useless. And anyway, it's just a state. It's something that began at a point, and it's going to end. And people think that's a very wonderful thing, and that should be made permanent. Just got an email this morning from a woman who wants to make oneness permanent. Well, hey,
the knowledge is permanent. But
knowledge
not
is
the
permanent.
State,
Yeah, and reality is permanent. The reason the knowledge is permanent is because reality is permanent, and the knowledge is true to the object.
Yeah. So the experience is important, but it's not the aim, and not the...
No, that's right. And it can be very helpful insofar as it can convince you that reality is non-dual. But if you interpret enlightenment as experientially, then you're always going to be craving for this experience of oneness.
Yeah. Because everybody has everyday little experiences of samadhi or
yeah, they
oneness,
do. Absolutely.
but it's the question what to do about it, and if you put it into the right knowledge, then you learn and
that's right.
Get rid of your ignorance.
And you just won't develop attachment to it.
No.
You know, because experience is not under the control of the jiva, the individual. Experience is under the control of Ishvara, the causal body or the gunas.
Yeah.
That's what's determining what you're experiencing. It's not up to you. Okay? That's what people don't understand. So the Ishvara gives them a beautiful experience, and then Ishvara takes away that experience. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, and then they're angry.
No.
And then they say, well, that's not good enough. Ishvara has given them back the experience they had before, or a different experience, and now they're unhappy with that, the new experience they've been given by Ishvara. They want to go back to the old experience, which they feel was better or gave them more, more happiness than the experience they presently have. And that's the whole problem with the experiential path to enlightenment. We're not saying there aren't non-dual experiences.
Yeah, it's nice to have ecstasies and
all that. Yeah. It's very nice, very nice. And yes, we'd love to have them all the time. Although I tell you, when you feel good all the time, you stop feeling good. You just get bored. You kind of wish there was something more than bliss, because it gets real boring after a while. This life is a varied life, and it's very cool that way. And it always keeps you interested. Whereas if you just have one experience all the time, you become bored. The mind needs that variety. And Ishvara will give you plenty of variety, because this is his creation is extremely complex and varied and multidimensional. It's really a cool place to experience. But, the bad news is that Ishvara is in control of it, not you.
No.
So, until you develop an appreciation for Ishvara, you're never going to be happy here, enlightened or not. You see these people who say they know their awareness, but still their lives don't work properly. Well, it's simply because they keep ignoring Ishvara, and they think awareness is going to take care of it. Well, awareness doesn't care. It doesn't see that there's a you, and it doesn't see that there's an Ishvara. It's just,
So it doesn't help unless you're not in harmony with your Dharma field.
That's right.
Yeah.
You have to be in harmony with it. Otherwise, enlightened or not, you're going to get rubbed against, because Ishvara doesn't see an unenlightened person any different from an enlightened person.
So all the work we do is to get in harmony with ourselves, or with the jiva and the Ishvara, or the world around us, and try to inquire, to gain knowledge, and then the rest comes by itself.
That's right. Absolutely.
But then there is these great Sadgurus, like Swami Shivananda. He was not just like enlightened in the sense which you explain, but I think there was a little more about him. He had like a special vision, and he knew things, and he had this great energy around him, and thousands of people are seeing the light around him, and something special, and he was so devoted. And you say there's not a different state of enlightenment, and I'm conformed with it.
His enlightenment was just the garden variety enlightenment that everybody has. Now, whether the manifestation of that knowledge depends upon the quality of his mind. So now some people develop their minds differently from others.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? So those qualities were the result of his living and his yoga. They weren't a result of his enlightenment. Because you find many people who are as enlightened as Swami. Anybody who's enlightened is the same enlightenment. It's not more or less. But what Shivananda did, and that's kind of Mahatmas do, is that they live a pure sattvic life. Their life is totally dharmic.
No.
And they eat right, they sleep right, they think right, they talk right, they're enthusiastic, they have all the virtues.
And the huge concentration.
And it's amazing, samadhana, it's called focus. They just stay focused on one topic, and the more they stay focused on that, the more powerful their minds become. And so they have a bigger impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Huh? They're not any greater or lesser. It's just with reference to others, they seem to be bigger or whatever than others.
But they're
But
cleaner or holier,
that's
or
right.
however you call it.
That's right. When you clean out your stuff, the more you clean out your stuff, the more the empty space is filled with just light.
No.
Although we all have the same potential, but awareness shining through a tamasic mind is going to give a tamasic manifestation. Awareness shining through a rajasic mind is going to give a rajasic manifestation.
So somebody said
he had a lot of rajas and a lot of sattva. That's pretty typical of these saints. Although I was with a saint that had virtually no rajas and a little tamas and almost pure sattva. He had 98% pure sattva. And he was just an amazing. But he didn't know anything more than I did.
No.
His knowledge of the self was exactly the same as my knowledge.
Yeah.
But he was a saint. He lived in India. He didn't have a family. He didn't have a job. He didn't.
He could spend all day on working on sattva.
He used to sit 50 days in meditation without eating. He just they'd lock him in this little temple, kutia, this little temple in his temple compound, and he'd sit there for 49, 50 days. Or he'd chant for weeks on end, with hundreds of people chanting with him. And you can imagine the kind of Shakti and the kind of purity that comes when you live that kind of lifestyle.
But it doesn't get you enlightened.
It just
raises your energy.
That's all. There's many, many people with great power and energy who are not enlightened at all.
Yeah.
I mean, they said Sai Baba had great power and energy, but when he died, they discovered that his apartment was full of gold. They're all fighting over the gold now. Now, how enlightened is that?
Mm-hmm.
Huh? That he has to have millions of dollars worth of gold in his apartment. Huh? No. It's not enlightened. He's attached. So, but he had great powers.
Yes.
Because he did all this sadhana. He did all this spiritual work.
And Ishvara wanted him to.
And that's right. And Ishvara and all of those powers actually belong to Ishvara. They're not really belong to the person.
But he behaved and had this craving for gold.
That's it.
And little boys, besides.
Well, that too. Sex and money.
Yeah.
So you can't always tell by the manifestations of a person whether they know who they are or not. So we in Vedanta we have a different definition for a jnani and a saint, for an enlightened person and a saint. Now, enlightened people can be saints, but saints and saints can be enlightened people, but it's it's not a direct correspondence. When you're enlightened, it doesn't make you a saint. When a saint, it doesn't make you enlightened.
And only a few are both, and
only a few are both.
Yeah.
So, we look at, Swami Shivananda. He was my guru's first guru, but he wasn't my guru wasn't satisfied with his teaching. He got awakened by him. He had the vision of non-duality through Shivananda, but it didn't clear all his doubts. Shivananda couldn't clear all his doubts, so he had to move until he met a guru who could clear his doubts and teach him who he was. So, doesn't mean Swami Shivananda didn't know who he was, or it doesn't mean that he couldn't clear the doubts of others. It just,
Yeah, I think he was a very intellectual type and had so many specific questions.
Yeah. So,
but this helps really a lot, the discrimination between a jnani and a saint.
A saint.
Yeah.
Well, you see, people are attracted to saints because they don't feel virtuous. We've been taught that we're sinners.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem with these cultures, particularly Western cultures or Christian cultures, and they start from the premise that you're a sinner. And then all you can do about that is be a really good person in this life, and then maybe you're going to get to this place called heaven later on, and maybe you're going to avoid hell. So we just have a great fascination and obsession with purity and virtue and goodness, with sattva guna. Now that's not good, but it's not bad either. We just have to understand the upside and the downside of this whole thing. Okay? So, and so people, they're constantly trying to be something that they're not. And then they invest in these saintly people qualities that maybe they don't have, like knowledge or whatever. We don't know. This is why we just teach the science, and then you can figure it out on your own, because you'll be clear what knowledge is and what sattva is, what virtue is, and so forth. All these things become very clear to you. And if you want to become a saint, you can become a saint. If you feel like that's what you want to do.
No.
But we're not interested in becoming saints. If Ishvara wants us to become a saint, we'll become a saint. And if Ishvara doesn't want it, we're not going to become a saint. So we don't have a personal desire to be anything. We don't have a desire to be great or small or wise or loving or anything. We just allow Ishvara to work through us. And we're just nothing but manifestations of Ishvara's desire and will, whatever it is. Whereas when you see that you're a jiva, when you take yourself to be a jiva, then there's all these ignorance or incompleteness or insufficiencies that are there in your mind, and that drives you to try to become something. Whereas a realized person is just a being. They're just being. They're not becoming.
No.
They know that there's nothing to gain here and nothing to become. That even as a jiva, they're fine.
Yeah.
In fact, you couldn't be anything other than you are as a person, because it isn't up to you. You didn't create yourself. So you turn your whole personality, your whole personhood over to Ishvara, because, hey, it's Ishvara all through and through. So, there's no attempt to change yourself or to have a different experience. And this whole problem about experience is just the most difficult thing, is wanting your experience to be different and not being satisfied with the experience you have at any moment. That's the biggest problem that human beings have.
Yeah.
Now, you can change experience up to a point. You can transform your experience, but you need to do it with knowledge. You need to understand what you can do and how to do it. And then if you want to transform your experience, you can. But the best thing is to find out who you are, and then you see that your experience, whatever experience you're having, is fine. And you will become more saintly as you go, once you know who you are, not because you want to become more saintly, but because you don't indulge in rajas and tamas. If you indulge in rajas and tamas, you're not going to become saintly. But you forego rajas and tamas because you know they produce suffering. And that leaves the mind naturally as it is, and the mind by its very nature is sattvic.
Mm-hmm.
The subtle body or the mind is made out of sattva guna. So if the rajas and tamas are removed from the subtle body, those tendencies, then a luminosity comes, and all the qualities that are inherent in sattva come out. Kindness, generosity, selflessness, all those qualities come out. They belong to the sattva guna, they don't belong to the person. And if I've surrendered my person to Ishvara and cling to my knowledge of myself as awareness, then my rajas and tamas disappears and I will become more saintly. It's simple. It's just science.
It is too simple to get.
It's too simple to get, yeah. That's right. And unfortunately, the spiritual world is so big and complicated and
so many
misconceptions. Right at the very beginning of the Gita, Krishna says, speaking as Ishvara, he says, many indeed are the notions of enlightenment, notions of the self.
Yeah.
And what he means by that is there's all kinds of confusion out there. And then he proceeds to set it straight, set Arjuna straight about what actually enlightenment is. So, and you can't get there unless you're ready to, you cannot understand who you are unless you're ready to let go of some of your notions. If you're so stubborn and resistant in your emotions and your notions, then you're just not going to ever get free. I noticed that woman who came the first day, she was so resistant and so stubborn, but now she's just sucking it up like a baby. She's finally given up her notions, and is just listening now. But the first day was really hard for her. She was angry all day long because she was hearing what she didn't want to hear. And I don't even know why she stayed. Sometimes those people that are that resistant go away right away. They just would rather protect their own views than listen to what's actually being said. But somehow Ishvara wanted her to listen, and she calmed down, and now she's sucking it up and actually smiling. Instead I'm getting this bad vibes from this corner of the room. I'm getting the smiling face.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because knowledge will set us free.
It does. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome indeed. It's lovely chatting with you, Narada.
Yeah.
And I hope we have many more wonderful chats in the future.
You have something to add for the moment?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so everything is said.
Everything is said.
Thank you very much.
You bet.